Thanks, Anthony. Oh, keyboard here. Hello, hello. All right. So I just want to say thank you, everyone, for coming. I see a lot of friends in familiar places, so it really means a lot that you guys came out to support me. So thank you. And my presentation today is going to be about how it just starts with one, how buying your first property can really set you up for financial success if you buy it right. And it's a really big snowball effect, and I'll talk more, but that's the gist of it. Oh, yeah. How much impact one house can make. So this is me. I was born and raised in Washington, and I grew up in a small city called Tukwila. And for those of you that don't know, Tukwila is south of King County, and I went to a high school there called Foster High School. And we're known as the most diverse school district in the nation. And so that's really special to me because I grew up with a lot of minorities. And because of that, I had a lot of cultural experiences growing up. And I'm really thankful for that. And I also have a birthmark on my neck. So I'm sure I've networked with a good amount of you, and you probably looked at my neck and you're like, dude, what's this guy up to, right? It's a birthmark, it's not a hickey. And my fiance's over there, so, we ain't crazy like that. So just gotta get that out of the way. So after graduating Foster High School, I went to go to the University of Washington in Seattle. And this was a really big deal for me because I was a first-generation college student. So growing up, we didn't have much. So a dream of mine was to always go to college, get a good degree, and then afterwards get a good job. And so if you're Asian in here and you had Asian parents growing up, you really only had 3 career choices, right? It's either a doctor or an engineer or you're a lawyer. And if you're not any of those, then you're kind of a disgrace to the family. And sadly, I couldn't be any of those, so I told my mom the next best thing I could do is a degree in finance. She's like, okay, that's fine. So I majored in finance. And right after, I got a job in corporate finance at a health insurance company called Premier Blue Cross. And when I got that job, I was stoked because growing up, this was like the dream. Go to a good college, get a good degree, get a salary job so that you can retire at 65. You can get 3% raises every year. And also, you have 100% job security. As long as you're loyal to your company and you work hard, they will take care of you. That's a dream, right? But after being in corporate for a couple of years, I realized that not a lot of these things that I was being taught when I was younger was really true. And I think one of the things that I thought about was that, retiring at 65. In retrospect, did you really want to retire at 65? Because you can't really do too much at that age. And what if you have kids at 30 or 40? Wouldn't you want to spend time with them? And another thing was that 3% raises every year. That's pretty awesome, but then I learned about inflation. And I also learned that it also grew at 3% every year. So I wasn't really making more money. And lastly, I really believe that if you worked hard at a corporate job, you would have really good job security. But with the recent layoffs that we've seen, and even being at my company for the past couple of years, we've had a lot of layoffs and a lot of people that had to leave their jobs. And so that really opened my eyes into thinking that there has to be another way to go about this, and that corporate wasn't the only way. So that's when I started to Google everything. Growing up, I didn't know anyone that was in business or in real estate. So I felt like, similar to everyone here, a rite of passage was reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Does this go that far? Nice. Was reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, going on to Bigger Pockets and browsing the forums. And then while I was on the forums, I found out about this strategy called house hacking. And it was super clickbaity. It was like, hey, do you want to live for free? Click here. I was like, dude, how do I live for free? So I clicked on the blog post, And it was basically about this guy, I think it was Brandon Turner that wrote it, but he house hacked his first property, and when he rented out the rooms, he was able to actually make money by his renters paying off his mortgage. And so I was like, this is like a cheat code. How come no one told me about this? You know, like growing up, it was just you buy one house and that's your forever home, and then you raise your family in it, and that's it. I didn't know that buying a house could also be an investment property, something that you can generate income while you live there. So this pretty much blew my mind. So I got really deep into a rabbit hole of how do I buy a house? I asked everyone around me that owned a house, and they said, hey, buying a house is really hard. You need to make at least 6 figures. Or if you have really, really rich parents, then they could, help you pay for the house. But also don't forget, you should always put 20% down because you never want to pay PMI, right? And so when I listened to those things, I was like, I hear you, but I feel like there's got to be some other way around it, because all these guys from bigger pockets are making so much money, and I'm pretty sure they're not doing all this stuff. So the more I learned about each of these, I found that they were actually myths. Like, yes, having a high income is good, but having a good debt to income ratio is even better. Having people help you pay for your down payment is really great, but you can also find down payment assistance programs to help you if you're a first-time home buyer. And lastly, 20% down is good if you don't want PMI, but as for someone like me that just started a job and didn't have a lot, it would have took me, I not calculated this, it would have took me like 25 years to get 20% down to buy my first house. So I was like, I'm not gonna wait that long. So I found out that I could buy a house with an FHA loan, and so that's basically what I did. And at the time when I was looking at when I was looking into this meme was like really popular. It was basically Shia LaBeouf doing an audition, and he's just saying, just do it, like just do it. You have nothing to fear. Like what is there to lose? Now I listened to it, I was like, you know what, you're right, man. I'm gonna believe you, even though you're kind of crazy right now, but I resonate with you. I'm just gonna do it. Even though I don't know anyone that personally has done it, I'm just gonna take the chance and pull the trigger, because I did my due diligence online and the numbers look good. So worst case, it'll still work out pretty well, was what I thought. So this was, I think I skipped the slide. Okay, so this was my first property that I bought, and it was in Burien. I purchased it for $346,000 and it appraised at $360,000. So right off the bat, I made $14K of equity. And then conventional, okay. So I said I'd use FHA, I should use conventional, my bad guys. But for this loan, I met with a lender that at the time had a down payment assistance program where if I put 5% down, they would give me back 2%. So in reality, I was just paying 3% to buy this property on top of closing costs. So after it's all said and done, my cash to close was closer to $17,000. So 3% down payment was like 10 grand, and then closing costs was closer to 7,000. So I was able to get my first property for $17,000 my first year after getting a job. Despite like my managers, I was asking him, he was like, are you sure you want to buy right now? The market's pretty crazy. We've been on a huge, increase since 2012, and it's gonna crash any moment. You should wait it out, man. Like because we're both in finance. Like I have a feeling the market's gonna crash, and that's when you should buy. I was like, man, you might be right. I'm getting a little bit hesitant now. But then I was like, nah, forget you. I gotta buy it because Shia LaBeouf told me. So I went ahead and I did it, and I'm glad I really did, because this was in 2018, and there was a huge market run from 2018 to like 2021 that I would have missed out on if I based my decision off of fear and off what could have gone wrong instead of just going for it. Okay, so this is me with my house hack the first year, and if you look really closely, I have like a man bun. So that was like the wild days, but I'm good now. But basically, when I bought the property, my mortgage was $2,250, And I rented 2 bedrooms out to my friends for $800 each. So at the end, between my fiance and I, or she was my girlfriend at the time, we paid $650 to live at this property. And this really blew my mind too, because at the time we were renting somewhere else for $1,800. And for us to own an asset where we only paid $650 compared to renting somewhere else for $1,800 was a big win. Yeah, we basically saved $1,000 a month while owning an appreciating asset. And these were the renovations we did to it. We didn't do anything crazy, just changed out the floors, repainted the cabinets, and changed out the countertops. And even though those things were minor, it made a big difference in the photos. So I think that when you're looking for your first property, we hear all these things where, it has to be huge value add. You need to break down all these walls, make sure you add an extra bedroom, blah, blah, blah. You could definitely go that route. But for me and what I was comfortable with as a first-time home buyer was just doing cosmetics like this. And at the end of the day, doing small changes like this I was able to add a lot of equity in my property at the very end. And I'll show you the numbers. Okay, so after I moved out of my property, this is what the numbers are now. So right now, 5 years later, our mortgage on that, so our principal, interest, taxes, and insurance is now $1,800 because I was able to refinance out of an interest rate of 5.8 to a 2.8 a couple of years ago. And because we did work to the property and added value, when we refinanced it, we were able to remove the PMI. So now we do a midterm rental where it rents for $3,350 a month. And with PITI being $1,800 and utilities being $300, because we pay for utilities, we're cash flowing $1,250 from that one property. So over a year, that's $15,000 a year. And this is how much I basically paid for that first property. $17,000 for the down payment and closing costs, and then we spent another $15,000 over the couple of years that we were living there to rehab it. So all in all, we spent $32,000 for this property, and now we're getting $15,000 a year in rental income. It's appreciated by $180,000. I was able to save a lot of money on my taxes since buying this property. I was able to get a good principal pay down, and also, this was lucky. I didn't know this was a thing back then, but my backyard was large enough where I can now put a detached ADU in it. And shout out to David. I don't know where you're at, David, but he was the one that told me this was possible. And so in the future, I'm going to build another property on this. So I'm going to have 2 properties for the price of 1. And so this is me now, 5 years later after buying my first property. And that's me, my fiance, my dog. They're over there. But this was us at our most recent house hack. We just bought another property last year, and that's us eating on a cardboard box, because sometimes that's the stuff you got to do, to make shit work. But I'm still at my corporate job, and right now I'm a real estate agent / investor. And my goal this year, and I'm telling you guys this now because I want it to manifest and come true, my goal is to quit my corporate job by the end of this year after I buy our 4th property. And so when that happens, I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to pursue real estate full time as a real estate agent and also buy properties as an investor. And for me, my why is, what you guys see right there. My why is my family. Because growing up, I saw that my parents sacrificed a lot for me. And I want to be able to retire them in the next couple of years. So my thought process is that every property that I can get that can cash flow is one property that brings them closer to retirement, because that is how they're going to fund the rest of their life. So that's my why. So that's pretty much it. Oh, yeah, so that was my presentation. Thank you guys for listening, and if you scan that code, that's my Instagram handle, so follow me. Questions? Yeah. Oh, that's actually not my project. That's Eric's project. But I'll piggyback.
So you said you're building a DADU in your backyard, but then you said 4 properties? Is that all in that same property, or are you buying something else?
I'm buying something else.
Okay.
I'm not building a DADU in my backyard yet. Instead, I'm saving the money to accumulate another property that also has a backyard that I can potentially build on in the future.
Gotcha.
So my game plan is to really just land bank right now and accumulate, and when I'm ready to build, I have those pieces of land ready to go higher.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. Yep.
You mentioned you were renting out like your other 2 bedrooms, and now you've moved out of that place.
Yep.
Do you rent all of the bedrooms individually still? Did you switch to renting the whole place to a single person? Or?
Yeah, so for that particular property, I'm renting out by the bedroom through Midterm Rentals. So my clients are traveling nurses and corporate professionals, and they're very okay with that. I haven't had long vacancies, and when you bring it up, they're like, yeah, we're used to it because we travel a lot. So that's how my numbers are higher than average for a Iberian property. Yep.
Have you compared them to the income you might get from a short-term rental, Airbnb or Vrbo?
Yeah, I have. And the difference is, I think, like $300 or $400 more a month. But for me, I have to figure out the Airbnb process, have to hire out cleaners, have to streamline that, and it's just a lot of time.
You could be able to I mean, I'm just curious, like, does that include you being the sole manager, or is that like you third-partying that out?
That's me being a sole manager.
Oh yeah, you don't want to do that.
Yeah, because for me, before I hire out, I want to make sure I know how to do it. I want to make sure I know the ins and outs, because how can I see if someone's doing a good job if I don't have that experience myself?
Fair point.
Should I buy my properties under an LLC, or should I buy under my name?
No. So for me, I bought my properties under my name, just because with conventional financing, and you guys can talk more to Kara about that, but I think it's harder to finance a property with like lower percent down, or maybe it's not even possible unless you do it as an owner occupied with your name. Harpreet.
You talked about fear being the biggest holdback for most people. Once you've gotten past that, what are some of the biggest hurdles you've faced thus far in your journey?
That's a very deep question. So for context, Harpreet's like my buddy from high school, so we're both from Tukwila. Anyways, I'd say for me, my biggest challenge now is not chasing shiny objects and being true to what has made me money over the past couple of years. Because I know everyone in this room knew about that big crypto and NFT phase a couple of years ago, and I was on that too. And so when I saw that, I was like, yeah, I gotta get into crypto, blah, blah, blah. But looking back, if I just bought another property with my crypto investments, I would have been so much further off. So for me, it's being very narrow and focused about knowing that real estate is the way for me to build wealth. Other people have done it through crypto, but for me, I just can't spread myself too thin, and I'd rather be focused and narrow rather than wide.
Thank you.
No more other questions?
How close is the midterm rental to like hospitals or stuff like that? Like, is it in like a really great location to do that, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so luckily my property, when I bought it, and I didn't know this till I looked it up on the map, it's close to one major hospital, but it's very close to 2 clinics. So what I've seen is that, you don't need to be too fixated on the hospitals around it, the major hospitals, as long as there are 2 or 3 clinics that are also close to it, because majority of your traveling nurses are going to want to be really close to those clinics. And they've been the majority of my tenants. Like we have a Iberian clinic and like an eye clinic near there. So that's where I've seen success. Faraday.
Can you talk a little bit more about just how much time it takes you to do the self-management, and also if there's been any like major damage since you were rented by the room and the high turnover over the years?
Yeah. So when I'm a very lazy person. So when we started doing midterm rentals, I wanted to streamline that process like immediately because I knew I was going to be renting by the room. So I just did this where I used a property management system called Avail, and the whole thing is very streamlined where it will do the background check, the lease, and also the rent payments, and it'll also notify them in advance so that I don't have to keep doing it. So when I first started out, I did it through like Venmo and Zelle, which took a lot of time. But over time, I've learned that there are better processes that I should have used instead. And so since using Avail, I probably spend like every turnover, maybe like an hour. Yeah, an hour or two. And it's just interviewing tenants over the phone and then forwarding to my background verification check. And I'll also have a list of directions that they can follow. So it's very, very streamlined at this point. And Michael?
Since you bought 3 properties and are working on a 4th, what changes from buying the first property to the 3rd? Are there parts that are like easier, or are there parts that get harder for you?
Yeah, I'd say the easy part is knowing when a property is a good deal, just because I've analyzed so many of them and I've helped clients like look for them. So I would say that's the easy part. The hard part for us now is really figuring out what we're comfortable with, because when you've been house hacking for a long time, and I gotta give my fiance Mona a lot of kudos for this, because we've had to sacrifice a lot in terms of like our space and our privacy. So for us, it's really deciding, do we still want to do rent by the room, or are we okay, foregoing some cash flow, but instead having more privacy? So we're looking more at like ADUs and DADUs now, where we can rent out, still house hack, but we have more of our space. So that's kind of been the dilemma. Jess?
Tell us about a deal you've helped a client find.
About a deal I've helped a client find?
Yeah.
Oh man. So I'd say for David and Alec, these two guys right here, I wish I had their house hack. Like when I found it, I was like, this is crazy, because for my numbers, I still had to pay like $600 a month to live there, and so split between me and my fiance, it was like $300. But for them, after they rented out, and after, how much you guys pay for down payment again in closing costs? $4,000. And so they paid $4,000, and once they rent out all the rooms, how much money are you guys gonna make?
Between like 500 and 700.
Yeah, so
when we're out of there, probably like 1,000 to 1,400.
Yeah, so while they're living there, they're getting paid $700 to basically live at their own property. And once they move out, they're gonna make, was it 1,000 or 1,200? But either way, they're getting paid to live at their own house, which is crazy to me. I was like, damn, I wish I was my agent. That was fire. Yeah.
So, how do you get an estimate of what would be a potential rental income? Silo's estimate, I don't think is a great way to do that. So, because how do you get comps? What's your source?
Yeah, we mainly use Rentometer for long-term rents. And on top of that, we use a house hack specific rental calculator that you can use. And in that calculator, it will show you this is what you can expect in terms of your mortgage, interest, taxes, insurance. But this is what you can expect if you're renting by the room. This is what you can expect in terms of vacancy, maintenance. So all those things wrapped together will help you feel confident when you put in the offer, and will paint a better picture for you. And so to answer your question, it's really a lot of different things that go into it on top of rent, but we do have a special calculator that we use, and we'll give it to everyone here for free. I'm pretty sure we're cool with that, but that's what we do for our clients. Yeah.
What are the key difference in terms of furnishing a midterm versus short term? Like, would you spend the same amount if you're furnishing midterm versus short term?
Yeah, so the question is furnishing, what's the difference in terms of furnishing for midterm and short term? I'd say it's pretty much the same. Because on the, actually I should have touched on this, but on the down months that we're not getting a tenant in there, where there's vacancy, we swap our midterm rental to a short-term rental. So if I know that there's gonna be a 3-week vacancy between my previous tenant to my new tenant, I'm gonna turn it on Airbnb. And so there's gonna be some cash flow within those 3 months. So we're not exactly just, leaving it vacant. Yeah.
Can I touch on that? I specialize in midterms. I would say the biggest difference between short-term and midterm is making sure that it's more comfortable. Short-term, they're coming in for a weekend. They're not cooking stuff there usually. They're going out to eat. They're going out to restaurants. It's a vacation. Midterm, you gotta make sure that the beds are comfier, couches are comfier. You got more comforts in the kitchen, and you look for a short-term. Stuff like
Yeah, that's a good point. And something that just came to my mind too is that blackout curtains are like very preferred by midterm tenants because they're mostly traveling nurses and they work crazy hours and some of them sleep in the daytime. So every request I've had so far is like, hey, do you have blackout curtains? I was like, yes, I do. So that's another thing.
Is yours a 1-to-1 ratio, bathroom to bedroom?
No, it's a 3-bed, 2-bath.
Okay. And
So
you're by the room.
yeah, so the upstairs is a 2-1, and so the 2 bedrooms share that 1 bathroom, and the downstairs has their own bedroom and bathroom, so I charge more for that.
Okay.
Where's the best place to find midterm renters?
I would say the best place, and I think I touched upon this a little bit earlier, are properties where there are hospitals but also clinics around it. So you can find them in Burien, Federal Way, Auburn, Renton, and you find them up north too. So what I do when I look for midterm rentals for clients is I go on Google Maps and I put hospitals, and it'll show me with a red H where all the hospitals are, and then you could see, okay, well this looks like a good potential for a midterm rental because there's all these hospitals next to it.
I meant like the actual renters themselves.
Furnished finder.
Oh, like how do I find them?
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha.
The tenant, sorry, yeah.
Yeah. So Furnished Finder is where I get 90% of them, and the other 10% is through Airbnb, where I put the minimum stay that they could do is 30 days or longer. So that way I weed out anyone else that wants to stay like for a couple days. Yeah.
Yeah, so 2-part question. One is how much more would you say you make via the midterm strategy as opposed to long-term with your Burien property? And then for maybe the Seattle market where even long-term rent is already really high, does MTR still make sense even because the base is already really high?
Yeah, and that's a good point too because interest rates are pretty high right now. Sometimes it's really hard to cash flow for long-term rental, so you probably have to pivot to midterm rental to make that difference. But what I've seen is with my property, a long-term rental would give me $2,500 or $2,500 a month, and my midterm rental gives me $3,300. Yeah.
You said you're switching to STR when there's some vacancy. Does that mean you need to maintain a license for STR for that house? And then what about the other properties? Because as far as I know, you can't have multiple, right?
Yes. So for the STR question, I don't have an STR license when I do it.
Okay.
So I'll just be straight up with that there, just because it's very rare that we do turn it on. And all my other properties are midterm rentals.
The license is a Seattle City ordinance, not a King County ordinance. So if you're outside the city, it doesn't. The one STR limit doesn't apply.
So outside of Seattle, you can do as many as you want.
Correct.
Yeah.
How do you deal with cleaning when you're renting out, like shared area, like bathroom, kitchens, cabinets?
Yeah, so I have house rules that they have to sign. That's a part of the lease. And as part of the house rules, I always advise that they clean up after each other, just because we're all adults and we're all professionals. But another thing I do too is one client moves out, instead of paying for just that room being cleaned, I pay for the cleaner to clean everything. And so every three months, I'll have a cleaner come in and clean the entire house, and that gets paid for by the tenant because I include that fee in the application. Yeah.
Is there any seasonality in medium-term rental demand? Meaning, are certain times of the year where it's easier to find a tenant versus the other?
Yeah, definitely. I'd say it's pretty similar to short-term rentals. I've had slow months in like the winter, and so for those months, I proactively lower my rent. So for example, the ADU that we're in right now, in the spring and summer, we rent it out for $2,100. And in the winter and fall, we rent it out for $1,950. Anyone else? Good? All right. Yes, sir.
Cool. Whew. That was good. There was a little lull in the questions there, and I thought we were done, and there was like 40 more questions, so y'all were holding back there. So just a couple of quick housekeeping announcements, real quick. If you are parked in that garage right there, we do validate the parking. We've got a little machine, silver machine, right by the entrance that you can just stick your ticket right in there and validate. Dennis is going to be hanging out, so if you were one of those sandbaggers that missed your chance to ask a question, you can still catch him. Go like do that mob thing that people do after a speaker and don't give him any breathing room and bombard him with questions. I'm asking you as a favor to me. So make sure to hit that parking validation on your way out so you don't have to pay for parking. We already heard from David Weiser briefly about his work with Backyard ADU. I'd love to invite up our other sponsor to just talk briefly about the market today for mortgages. Dennis bought his first property in 2018. I bought my first one in 2012. The strategies that we're using today are different than the strategies that we're using in a lower interest rate environment. And I've had this question a couple of times where people ask me, when is the best time to buy a house? And the answer to that question is that there's no best time, but what we look for in the strategies that we use have to pivot and change with the market, right? Because what worked 10 years ago might not work today. And I have a suspicion that 10 years